The United States is under fire, and according to reports, 2024 will be the toughest year on record for millions and millions of Americans. However, it is not just the American people that are going to feel the effects. According to experts, they say the entire world will potentially feel the effects and crumble because of what the United States goes through over the next year.
And we're back. And today we've got an all-star panel. We've got our in-house Mad Bomber, Mike Sterling. We have Dr. Jennifer Stankus back with us. We have Jeff Emde with us, former CIA operative, and Keith Graves, 30-year law enforcement officer at a high level and now trains law enforcement across the country. The topic that we're discussing today is potential Black Swan event or events happening in 2024 and what you can do to prepare for that. But first, let's get a definition of that. Mike, do you want to share the definition of a Black Swan event?
Sure. And this is the ridiculousness of the press using this. A Black Swan event is a high impact event that is difficult to predict under normal circumstances, but that in retrospect appears to have been inevitable. A Black Swan event is unexpected and therefore difficult to prepare for, but is often rationalized with the benefit of hindsight as having been unavoidable, which I find hilarious that the press keeps on using it, but it's obviously just the buzzword of the week for these guys.
Exactly.
I think the second part of that definition would be that it's an event that dramatically changes the landscape for a broad swath of the population.
Good. That's well said, Jen. Mike, do you want to do the conflicted question of the day first?
And yes, conflicted question of the day. I love these things, man. I love messing with people's heads. All right, this is a good one. You guys are gonna like this one. I'm kind of down with this one. After the collapse, a loved one ran out of mood regulating medication and has lost it. She is frequently putting the group at risk by not obeying the general rules of the group and picking fights with other members. Tensions have built to the point where the rest of the group members want you to take decisive action and handle the situation. What would you do to restore order? And we will talk about this at the end of this video. So think about it, and we're all going to go through our answers at that time.
Is that a real question, or do you make that up?
Mike? I swear to God, that is a real question right there. Here in the South, we don't put away crazy. We give it a cocktail and let it wander around on the front porch.
I've had this feeling in the back of my mind that you're making some of this stuff up. All right, so let's talk prepping for a Black Swan event. So there's some basic things that we can cover first. Who wants to tackle that? Jen, go ahead.
I would just broadly state that knowledge is power. And when you are on your own, you need to be able to figure things out. For me, the biggest thing is, do I have the resources downloaded, ready to go that I would need for just about anything, whether it's fixing something in the house, fixing a generator, fixing whatever, or maybe even a medical technique, something. So to me, it's broadly thinking about, if I truly am on my own and I need to figure things out, what resources do I need to do that?
Okay. That's good. Anybody else? Keith?
Another thing that people forget is good training, like official training, right? So not just self-defense, firearms training, but like Jen mentioned, like good medical training. So sometimes it might be hard to find a good class, but a lot of these backwoods EMT courses are really good, like long-term stuff. There's a lot of PJs that are doing classes right now, and those guys are probably the best to go to right now. Go to a class that a PJ's putting on and look at long-term taking care of somebody and doing it on your own. And a lot of that stuff isn't that hard. So there's different like prepper groups that you can join where everybody's got different skill levels. So there's like one training group I belong to up here in Idaho where we have an ER doctor. We've got a couple SWAT team guys. We got a couple military guys. We got an intel guy. We talk about doing ISR, like how to do your own intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance of the area. But just any kind of that formal training, people forget about it, because what I see a lot of people say, well, I'm going to do this. You have no idea how that's going to be in the real world. And a good way to look at it is I always go back to Katrina. When Katrina happened, we saw what's going to happen on a national level when we lose everything. And when society, and this time it's going to be different, the cops are not going to be around like they were in New Orleans. Is a very corrupt agency, but you're not going to have anybody show up to work because the cops have been vilified so much. They're just going to go home and say, I've had enough. I'm going to worry about my family, and they're going to head home. It's going to be even worse. So that training, that firearms training, medical training, how to survive, like a lot of people are like, oh, like especially here in Idaho, I want to go head up to the woods and go camp out in the woods. No, you're not. 0 degrees up in the mountains right now. And and it's just after hunting season. So good luck finding that nice buck that you're going to go eat, along with the best way to look at it is look at hunting season, like the opening day, and go out into the woods and see what it looks like. It'll be that multiplied by 20.
Looks like Fallujah out there.
This episode of SDN is brought to you by Switch It Up, your national grid down service provider. Get a quote on a solar PV system with battery backup at switchitupinc.com or click the link in the video description below.
Another thing too is that people are being conditioned to be lawless. Like
Absolutely.
the amount of law, people are not going to have the restraint maybe that they might, just a personal moral standpoint, when it's been normalized that it's okay to go out and loot and do all of these things because there are no consequences.
Absolutely.
That's a great point, Jen. Jeff, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, the engineer in me has come up with this one. Look at everything in your home that is digital or electric powered, and make sure you have an analog or a hand powered equivalent. How many people don't have the screwdrivers, but they have an electric screwdriver? How many people don't have a hand drill, but they have an electric drill? A saw. If you have no electricity, your circular saw is not going to work. And when it comes to information, we talked about it last time about having maps instead, because you can't, GPS probably will not work, power will not work, phones will not work. So have hard copies. In the old days, we used to have encyclopedias. We don't have that anymore. But think about hard copies that you can have of things you might really need, like how to prepare and can goods, foods, how to prepare. Think about what your grandparents had before, or great grandparents had before electricity, and say, maybe I should have that. We talk about boiling water to make it safe. How many people have big pots where they can boil a lot of water? How many people with electric stoves even have the matches around to light it when the electric lighter won't work?
An electric stove?
You really need to think about. If there's no electricity, how are you going to function? There's no internet. How are you going to learn how to, I don't know, something stupid like make soap? People don't know how to do things anymore because they just look up the videos on YouTube. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody. But
Everyone
need
is.
to know how to do stuff.
Jeff brings up a good point about having hard copies of stuff. Way back when Mike and I were in the same battalion, our battalion got shut down, got bracked by Clinton. And I remember the library was wide open. And I remember the commander comes in and says, take whatever FM field manual that you want. I wiped that place clean, and I have them to this day. I've got everything from like the old survival field manual to military operations, urban terrain, sniper operations. But a lot of it's that I think we were when that happened, like 22 or something way back then. I just grabbed everything that had to do with any kind of that was going to help me survive on my own so that I can go back and reference. And it sucks lugging that to every house you move to as you get older because it's boxes of stuff. And my wife's like, can we get rid of this? Absolutely not. And when I finally need that, I'm going to be like, I'm vindicated.
I got my 2 pieces of 2x4. I've been hanging on to this 10-inch section of two pieces of 2x4 for 35 years, and I'm going to use it.
You got anything, Mike, on the basics that you want to add?
Absolutely. And I'm just going to go back to what I always say, fundamentals, right? Without the training, all the other gear is nothing but pieces, parts. All right. If you don't have the appropriate training, train now, cry in the dojo, laugh on the battlefield, right? If you're not training now, you have nothing. You're just a gear drop for somebody else. You're not going to figure it out.
And not under duress, right? So before we wrap up the basics, I'll just whip off a couple bullets here. Doing these things is really dependent on your disposable income and whatnot, but stock up on as much food and water as possible, including your pets and livestock. Stockpile some durable medical goods. So think all the stuff you would find in first aid and trauma kits. Speaking of which, stock up on your own meds and common meds. Use somebody like Contingency Medical to order that stuff. And of course, stock up on ammo. We've discussed that ad nauseum on our channel. So moving on to the next piece of the puzzle, and Jeff's already spoke to it a little bit. What are you going to do for electricity if the grid is down? Somebody want to jump in, Keith?
So the Army did a great job teaching me how to be homeless. So I am completely comfortable living without electricity. So for me, I did stuff like, look, there's not like your wood is all going to, like, you're not going to go cut down a tree and then start cooking right away. Okay. The other thing is the other 100,000 people that live in your city are going to try and cut down the same tree. So it's not going to be what you think. So I did stuff like solar stove. And then a lot of my stuff, like, look, man, like in the Army, I just learned to eat all my food cold. And beyond that, I don't need electricity. I'm A-okay. In fact, my ultimate bug out location was homesteaded by my wife's family. And when they came over on the Oregon Trail, you can still see wagon ruts. We actually take the Oregon Trail to go to where we need to go, and we can get there in less than a tank of gas. And when we land there, we have a lumber mill that's all by hand. We have and it's all original 1800s. So I've set everything up that I have no electricity. Generator. Oh man, don't think you're going to turn a generator on if you live in an urban environment. Even if you live in a rural environment, somebody's going to hear that Jenny going, and they know that you got something good, and they're going to come for you.
Quick anecdote here. So 2005, Charlie comes through Florida. It came ironically across the entire state, smacked us on the East Coast with a Cat 5 and took out power. Oh, we lost Mike. Took out power for our area for 3 weeks. South of us, New Smyrna Beach, 3 months with no power.
This video is sponsored by William Tell Archery Supplies, home of the Mini Striker crossbow. Click the link in the description below to learn more.
You'll get a kick out of this, Keith. Everybody's got their generators. It's sitting outside and it's running 24/7. Some thieves got the idea that they would take some cheap lawnmowers that you could probably get on Craigslist for $20, and in the middle of the night, take the lawnmower up to where your generator was outside, start the lawnmower up, kill your generator, walk away with it. And people be like, oh, that generator's still running. Go back to sleep and then get up in the morning, generator gone, sort of thing.
That's actually pretty smart.
Well, you would know better than anybody in law enforcement how.
Dude, there are people I know people out there go, oh yeah, the world's a bad place and there's some evil people. Man, you have no idea about just how horrible in the criminal element. And like, I'm in a very nice place in Idaho, but I can drive around and go, oh, that guy's on fentanyl. Oh, that guy's a meth user. And when they don't get their drugs, they're going to come to you because they're not thinking properly, and you're going to have problems. Think Somalia.
They have no regard for life or hurting people. They'll do whatever they need to do to get the drug.
You should see the
including to their own family. That's kind of says it all, right?
Mm.
It's not just a stranger. They'll do this to anyone. It's really it's revealing.
For sure. When you look at these closed cop social media groups where you got to actually submit your ID to get into this group, and there's like 50,000 cops in these groups. They're very open. There's any kind of a major disaster, hurricane or whatever, everybody does, hey guys, Florida guys, check in. And the Florida guys, the crimes that they're talking about, and everybody, all the cops in there, all 40,000 of us are in there talking about like, oh yeah, man, when society collapses, it's going to be like this across the nation. Cops know more than anybody what's going to happen because we see it on a little microcosm on a daily basis, but often enough. I remember the Oakland earthquake back in, when was that, 89. We got sent for mutual aid to go to Oakland. And when we roll up, there were people in the collapsed freeway stealing from the dead bodies in the collapsed freeway. And it took us 20 minutes to get there, red lights and siren, to go help out their city. And our city was in trouble too. But like when we show up and they're stealing from the dead bodies in there, what do you think is going to happen when the electricity shuts off for one day? And I've talked about this before, where I talked to people that worked for a major utility outlet on the Western US, where they said when they do their exercises to restart the grid, when they restart it, it's from everybody sitting at their desk. It's not, and everybody's sitting in their stations. It's not the guy that has to drive 4 hours out in the middle of nowhere to go flip a breaker. And for them to do that with everybody sitting at their desk, it's a week and a half to get everything restarted for the whole, like when we say region, I can't say which one it is because I don't want to burn those guys, but it's ginormous. For that area, go ahead.
Keith, I think you mentioned something that I think is really important. It's mindset. And most of us who are into this and think about this and talk about it are pretty good people, pretty reasonable, disciplined, nice people whose hearts are good. We want to help other people. But you have to be in the mindset of this is zombie apocalypse. They're coming for you, and not to have trigger hesitancy, not to this, like you need to protect yourself like they're coming at you, because they are. You just have to have that mindset. And you can be kind when you can be kind, but when you need to not be kind, you need to not be kind.
So
Lesson
you
of
look
the
at
day.
when you look at concealed carriers that are involved in self-defense shootings, when you look at what led up to it, the use of deadly force should have been used much earlier. But they wait and they wait and they wait and they keep going, and or you go to someplace where somebody had a gun, got robbed, or something bad happened, they got shot, and you're like, hey man, why didn't you shoot him? And they're like, well, I thought I was going to get in trouble, or they have never thought about it. Like, I think constantly, like when I'm at church, I'm literally at the front door, and I tell everybody this: when you see me just staring at the door, I've killed like 500 people coming through the door, like since I've been standing there, because I've gone through every possible scenario of somebody coming into the church to come kill everybody and how I'm going to stop it. And what's amazing is, as a cop, you get taught that in the academy to do this visualization technique. And then you'll find it. I remember the first time I saw a guy get stabbed, it was a liquor store getting robbed. I rolled up, and I'll never forget, it was right next to a creek. It was an AM PM. And I remember seeing the fight, and I see this guy take a knife and shank him. And then the guy bolts. And I immediately was on the radio, putting it out, chasing the guy down, and we got him. And I remember thinking to myself, and I remember everybody going like, dude, that was smooth. And I'm like, because I've thought about 20 different times. Every time I pass this store, I think about, what am I going to do when I see somebody get shot, stabbed, or whatever. And then when it actually happens, you've gone through it in your head and you've done it. And it just makes everything so much more smooth. Jen's right, though. Mindset, 100%.
On the trigger hesitancy, and I always tell people I go shooting with and stuff like that, and they're talking about self-defense situations. And I said, and it was I think it was a police officer a long time ago told me, he goes, it's better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6. So when in doubt, think of your own ass first.
You're right. And the other thing to think about too is, a lot of people think it's all deadly force. A majority is going to be less lethal. It's going to build up to that. And nobody thinks about that. Like when you look at a concealed carrier, their only option is to shoot somebody. And I go to church, I monitor church security teams, and I'll sit there and go, hey, you have guns. That's awesome. What do you have for a lesser means? And they're like, what do you mean? Like, do you have pepper spray? Do you have a Berna? Do you have like anything? Right. They don't. They have absolutely nothing. Right. I'm like, all right. So when you go to court, because there is going to be a reckoning for whatever happens in America, there's going to be a reckoning after. What's going to happen now is you're going to be standing trial, and the questions, if they find out what you did was wrong, they're going to say, so your only option was to shoot somebody. That's your only option here, was deadly force. You had nothing in between. So for me, I carry a collapsible baton in my truck, and I always carry like it's one blast thing of pepper spray, but huge cone goes forever. Or bear spray. I've talked about it on here before. Have bear spray or something that you can fall back onto, because a lot of it is going to start off in a less lethal realm, and it's going to help you in your mindset. And afterwards, I've tried everything I can do to make this guy go away. And now this is my only other option. Not saying that you don't go to deadly force right away. I know somebody in the comments is going to be like, guy punts a gun at me, I'm not pepper spraying. I'm not saying that. But there's going to be a point where it's going to be like, hey, I want all your food. I'll give you an example. People working undercover, people have attempted to rob me 3 separate times. None of them happened where the gun came out first, right? And each time I was like, dude, you have no idea what's going to happen to you, right? Because like, there's literally 20 guys watching me right now, and they're thinking 20 different ways of shooting you here in a minute. And I remember one guy, I just looked at him and I said, you're literally going to die in about 5 seconds if you don't walk away. I'm begging you, just turn around and walk away.
Where are you from, Holmes?
Oh, he looked at me because I was buying dope from him, and he decided to rip me off of my money. And he literally looked like, I think that guy's right. Like, I don't think he's lying. And he turned around and walked away, and it was quick, right? But the second guy, I was like, hey man, back off. And then I used the less lethal means, and then that stopped everything. Like, just that preparation, getting ready. It was never just gun out. It was always stuff leading up to it. And there were things in all 3 times we didn't shoot anybody, but like it came close. But each time people like, they took that warning, or they took the less lethal. And each time they were met with overwhelming force, to where they were just like, I'm so sorry. No takey backsies. You started this train. It's not going to stop.
So since we're on this subject, Jen, can you just share your thoughts on, you travel back and forth between Nevada and Washington State, and you've got some thoughts on less lethal versus lethal. Also, the fact you can't get self-defense insurance in Washington because of the nature of the laws and the Soros DA. So why don't you share that before we continue on with grid down stuff?
I'm a big 2A person. Everyone knows that. There are a lot of 2A people who are like, this is my right. This is what I carry. I'm going to use my gun, and good for you. But what I would say is that you want the best outcome for you. I don't care about the bad person. You want the best outcome for you, and think about it in those terms. My goal is not to kill someone who comes after me. My goal is to stop that threat and to make sure that I'm safe. So to that end, and having defended a lot of people and reviewed a lot of these cases, I can tell you that the vast majority, just like he said, of these cases do not require lethal force. So if you're carrying and training, like that's your only option, that will be your only option, because you're not training and thinking about it other ways. I personally love Byrna. Even in my shotgun at home, my first 2 rounds in my shotgun are less lethal. They're the Byrna rounds. And I guarantee you that's going to stop some of those things. It may not kill them, but it's going to buy you time to decide, do I need to go to lethal? People can disagree with that or not. I keep slugs or double-aught buck on my side saddle. I can always just port load that if I want to go that the first round, whatever. But what I'm saying is that you want options. Options are good, just like knowledge is good. You don't want one option. That's bad. So I keep a Byrna in my car. It's got, for 2 reasons. One is that first round, just the projectile easily breaks windows. I don't know if you've ever tried to break a car window, but it's not easy. That will break a car window quickly. The second round is CS and pepper, and that fills up the car pretty quick and would stop the threat. I like Byrna. I also like it because you can miss and still have the intended effect that you want, because a lot of people, including law enforcement, miss even when they're using lethal, and you are responsible for every round downrange.
Which is an unenviable position to be in somewhere like Washington State, where if you use deadly force, highly likely you're going to be charged with one level or another of homicide, right? And then you have to hire somebody like you to defend themselves. Yeah, this is the Byrna Mission 4 rifle. I do a fair bit of training with this. They make great stuff. Anybody who hasn't experienced Byrna stuff, it's the real deal. I got hit with one of these in the back twice on purpose for testing purposes, and it was not a good idea. It did not tickle.
Testing purposes. Hey, let's see what this does.
The other thing that's great about it is, for me, another big threat is wildlife, whether it's a dog, I'm out running, or I'm out doing a trail run or mountain lion, whatever. Like, I don't want to kill the thing. I just want it to go away.
There've been quite a few videos lately that have gone viral on X of hunters being rushed by packs of hogs, and a pretty vicious situation. Anybody who's hunted hogs can attest to that, especially the big ones. You get like 4-inch cutters on them, they'll mess you up.
And I guarantee you 5.56 does not penetrate the frontal section of their skull. It doesn't do it.
That's crazy, isn't it? So we were on the topic of grid down stuff, Mike, when you got bounced out and came back in again. Jeff, you spoke to it first as far as not having power. So just try to get us back on track here. What are your recommendations as far as being prepped for extended grid down? And then Mike will get your thoughts on that after Jeff.
Well, as I mentioned before, look at everything you have that's electric and see if you can come up with a non-electric hand-powered analog to that. Same thing with anything with batteries, because batteries run down. So just think about maintaining your home. Think about hand tools. Think about having lumber and nails available. You talk about boarding up your windows. You're not going to board them up with an electric drill when the battery dies. Anything like that. You look at, I'm going to boil water. You may not be able to. So you may need one of those hand pump water filtration systems. Just imagine you don't have electricity. And what are you going to do? And electricity is not going to be available anytime soon. So you got to have analog equivalents. And again, that goes especially with data and information. Maps, books that tell you how to do things that everybody takes for granted about cooking, canning, making soap, things like that. The Oregon Trail comment is perfect, because that's what you're going to be. You're going to be living like your great-great-grandparents. They knew how to do it. We don't.
What we think of as survival skills today, just a couple generations ago, it was just life. It's just like, this is what we do.
People forgot how to do that.
For sure. Mike, let's get your thoughts on grid down, because like Jeff's advice is fantastic. Actually, the first person I've heard say, look at all your electric devices and try and find something that could replace that. But what about people, Mike, who have diabetes and they have to keep insulin cool, refrigerate, all that sort of stuff? And I know grid down is something you got lots of knowledge on. So let's hear your thoughts.
So one of the big things that whenever we were overseas, especially in like Africa or someplace like that, in a very austere environment, we would have a little bit of power that we would be able to produce ourselves, either through wind, solar panels, whatever. But the very first thing that you have to do is you have to establish a power plan, right? These are the things that I absolutely have to provide power for, okay? This may not necessarily be one of those things. All right. I have to provide power for keeping some meds cool, things like that. All right. I have to be able to provide some power for keeping radios charged. Okay. Stuff like that. All right. I have to be able to recharge batteries for night vision devices or for weapons sight. Fine. Okay. The bare minimum. It is a triage situation. Have a power plan, determine how much power you absolutely gotta have on a daily basis, figure out how much wattage is required to be able to produce that on a daily basis, and then provide yourself triple that, because it's never going to produce what you want it to produce on a square footage basis. Just not going to happen. You get that much that you need, and then you triple it, all right? Because it's better to have and not need than need and not have. If you can produce more than you need, you're golden.
Yeah, absolutely. We're in Hurricane Central here in Florida, so we're used to extended periods of grid down. Just a couple points that I jotted down earlier relative to this topic is have something like a gas generator, preferably a propane generator, handy, and fuel for it. I say preferably propane because the tanks for your grill work for the generator. You don't have to stabilize it. You don't have to worry about octane levels. Generators are high compression engines. So as compression goes up, octane requirements go up. Otherwise you get detonation. Basically means your piston melts to your cylinder wall. A lot of this though is like a person's economics or family's economics. So maybe it's not doable to go get a propane generator or a gas generator, although you can get an ALP propane generator for $529 on Amazon. That's a really high quality piece of equipment. So then we start talking about power stations, which we've covered in depth, solar panels with the power stations. But be aware, as Mike just mentioned, you're not going to throw a solar panel out, even here in Florida, and charge it anywhere near what you think you're going to charge that. And you can't go by the specifications. So you unfold a 200 watt folding panel, and then you monitor it, the declination to the sun, the strength of the sun, what's going on for cloud cover. You might get 50 watts out of that 200 watt panel. Now it takes 4 times
worse. What if you're downwind of a city and that city's on fire?
There you go. Exactly.
I mean, look at what was going on up in New Jersey and New York, up there in the Northeast. What was it? Earlier last year? Man, I was up there a couple of times, and dude, the sky was just awful with all the smoke coming down from Canada.
Yeah,
and it was that way for weeks. Yeah. That is going to cut your solar way down. So you've got to come up with an alternate method for that. Now, I don't care what that method is. Now, also remember, your power production has also got to reflect your security situation, right? Yes. If it's a situation where you can't be producing power, maybe you're in an apartment building. It makes it kind of difficult to run a Jenny when you're in an apartment building. You may just have to make a decision. Listen, everybody on this floor is going to have to use the exact same refrigerator.
Yeah, good point, Mike. And again, tying this back to families' economics, then you, Jeff, if you can't afford a generator, hopefully you can afford a power station. If you can't afford a power station, then try and get some small power banks, preferably the ones that have a little solar panel. At least you could charge a radio, especially like an HT, like a handheld radio, so you can get NOAA updates, weather updates, and EBS stuff. And if that's not doable, at the very least, stock up on batteries that are all your common sizes. You can get a hand crank radio as well, for sure.
Yep. Because it's all calories. Right. Everything that we're going to do, absolutely everything that we're doing is calories. Now, I don't care if you're producing those calories from wheat, or you're producing those calories from a chicken, or if you're producing those calories from the sun, or if you're producing those calories from gasoline or propane. It's all calories, right? And all I'm doing if I'm using gasoline is I'm substituting the calories that I would use from me. It's all calories. It all comes down to how many calories are we going to use today, but from what source?
Chris, real quick, the other thing to talk about with security, even if you live in a rural area, there are people that are unprepared or just criminal elements that are going to come out and target you hearing the generator or seeing your solar panels. If you have a nice solar panel setup that everybody can see, they know where to go. You just advertised it. For me, I know I'm not going to get full wattage because mine's going to be in an area where nobody's going to see it, which isn't the best to get the sun. I don't care. I just need to power radios and a couple of other things and I'm good. So you need to think about a security plan that when you've got that stuff out, that 24/7 people are up and watching that, even in a hurricane situation, which we talked about, Chris, with you in Florida, and then also, but you got to have something in place because they're coming for you and they're going to come take it.
My wife and I both grew up in the construction industry. We do all of our own work. We have our cabin right now that we're renovating. We're doing it ourselves. And anybody who's worked in colder temperatures, like our cabin in the mountains, a large propane powered construction furnace works great and it won't kill you with carbon monoxide. So don't necessarily do what I'm fixing to say, but we've run propane generators inside with carbon monoxide detectors and detected zero risk and kept it out of sight, out of mind from other people. But Jeff, I know you wanted to add something.
I was thinking when you talk about a generator, you don't need to run it 24/7. If you're doing it to make sure your food in your freezer doesn't go bad, freezers are really well insulated. So you may only have to run it for 30 minutes to an hour a day just to bring those temperatures back down and limit the amount of times you open that. You don't want to run them at night because it's awfully quiet at night and people will hear it. And you don't want to connect it to lights in your house because a well-lit house, if you're the only lit house in a neighborhood, you might as well be putting out searchlights for a Hollywood premiere. Everyone's going to know where to go. Other sources of electricity. Okay, I have a little electric golf cart I drive my dogs around. Well, it's got a whole series of batteries and it's got USB ports. So I can charge all my phones and iPads and everything off of that for a long time because I can drive almost 100 miles on a charge. How much? That's a lot of calories to charge up cell phones and things like that. Emergency radios that are the hand crank type. They have batteries, but also have the hand cranks. Shortwave, that may be the only source of information you get because if cell towers go down and everything stops, there still will probably be broadcasts on shortwave somewhere, so you can at least find out what's going on in the world.
Good point, Jeff. I would just add, because we probably go without power more than anybody in the nation when we get smacked by hurricanes. So the guidance here is that if you run a generator and power your fridge for 45 minutes a day and don't have the door open and close all the time, that will keep your food safe, is the number they throw out here. The other thing is that on our properties, we have battery backups, and I can run a generator for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, keep those battery backups topped up, and that burns approximately 1 gallon of gas per day, because gas is hard for us to get when the hurricanes hit, because if there's no electricity, you're not pumping any fuel. Not to mention the fact that the refineries aren't sending trucks into Florida when we're getting hit with hurricanes. Usually 24 hours before we get hit with a hurricane, finding fuel's mission impossible. That, plus, this is a little known fact to people who live outside of Florida, when a hurricane comes along, the cows stop producing milk and the chickens stop laying eggs. You couldn't find them to save your life.
That's because they also know that the primary food source for disaster situations is French toast, because you have to get all the bread, milk, and eggs from the grocery store.
Hey,
I mean, that's the rule in the South.
Stop sharing our secrets here, Mike. Gravy too, so you can have squirrel dumplings and gravy.
Hey man, don't go knocking squirrel and dumplings, man. Don't go knocking that. Good.
I'm not knocking it.
Hey, real quick, Jeff brought up a good point about just hiding yourself. I'm going to share part of my plan. I'm going to make it look like my house is not worth coming to. So for me, I'm going to take my most unwanted furniture, go throw it in the driveway, and go light it on fire. And then I have a big burnt pile mess up front. I've got spray paint that makes it look like use black and grays, and you do it where the vents are. And then you spray paint the outside to look like smoke had come out and burned up that section. You black out your windows, so that way it looks like the typical burned out house. And you put a for sale sign out front. Go steal it from a neighbor. Go put a for sale sign out front. literally it looks like your house was already ransacked and there ain't anything worth going to.
So what you're
And I
saying is
still-
it makes it look like a house for sale in Detroit.
Like seriously, like, so a lot of people are like, they think they're going to go out there in their Cry Precision uniform with their jumpable plate carrier and go like stand guard. Awesome. I know which house to hit. Right. I look like I worked plain clothes for a majority of my career. And what I learned is that I can blend into any neighborhood. I've gone in neighborhoods in really bad parts of Oakland. I think the worst part of Oakland, California, worst parts of San Francisco. And I can stand out and not get robbed because I look like everybody else and I look like I belong. Right. My whole job is to look like a gray man. The entire time, though, there's a couple times I had an MP5 SD on me, you know, or because you can still conceal that if it's wintertime. Right. And you're going up to your final point to go take down a bad man, but you got to blend in and you can still blend in with what you need to do. You need to look at that for your house and you need to look at that for yourself.
So tell me that you weren't blending in San Francisco by defecating on sidewalks or anything like that.
There are landmines everywhere there. So San Francisco, if like, I know people watch the news, right? But I grew up in that metro area. And I remember as a kid taking the train over there all the time. Oakland is actually 100% worse. Oakland by far is just a third world country. I've never been to a major third world country, but there it goes again. Dang it. See, look, even Apple agrees with me. Look at that.
Especially the neighborhood around the Oakland Meps.
Oh, dude, I remember going there. Did you have to go there? Oh, that was horrible, man. But San Francisco, though, it's horrible. But think when those people, like I moved to an area where it takes more than a tank of gas from a major metro area to get to me. Okay. Because they're not going to refuel to come get to me, or they're not going to be able to. So Portland, Reno, Seattle, those are all the nearest metro areas that are more than a tank of gas away, because those people, they're all going to leave and they're going to come to your neighborhoods because you have stuff that they want and they'll get there.
So it's interesting you hit on applying gray man thinking of principles to your home, because the next major topic in my notes here is to fortify your home. So who'd like to roll with that one first?
I've bashed down so many doors. Like I made a living off, like you write search warrants and you're going after bad people, and I've probably bashed in 1,000 doors. 100% fortifying your house is super easy. I'll give an example. We have secondary breach points. You have primary breach point, secondary breach point. So the primary, let's say we're going to hit the front door. Your secondary is always the rear slider, because they'll put, we call them narco bars, and it's to keep the narcs away. But they got the bars up front, and then behind that, it's a man trap where now it's a cage behind that door. So you're not going to go in there because you're just going to die in that little area. So you can see the narco doors. I just go around the back and it's a great glass door. There's literally like nothing protecting it. You just throw your ram right through the glass and then walk in. It's actually the easiest place to get in, or a garage door, side garage door. Look, the easiest way that you can take care of all of this, number one, is look at your house from the outside. You can plant bushes underneath your windows that have thorns and stuff like that, right? So think about like rose bushes, blackberry bush, something that looks nice, but I'm not going to go hide in there because I got to cut your bush down to even get in there in the first place, right? Doors, you can replace all your screws for your striker plates and then your hinges. Those are decorative screws that are about half an inch long, maybe. Those things go, the striker plate is like a goal. See how far you can get that striker plate to go across the room when you hit that door, right? Or they'll fortify that deadbolt, but the hinges have nothing done to them and they still have those weak screws. So you just bash in the hinges, or you shotgun breach, and that shotgun back there, I'm actually setting up to be a shotgun or to be a door breacher. But what you do is you put in those like nice 2.5-inch screws. So the screw on the striker plate, replace it with those like 2.5 to 3-inch screws that go all the way into the door frame. And I've hit those before where you're hitting them and you can just see the door bending, and you can see and you can see the screws coming out. And you realize like, hey man, I'm going to hit this 20 times. It ain't going to come out. Right. You got the steel plate that goes over your door frame, right? That goes around the deadbolt and everything else. Cause that's all going to splinter apart, but you get one solid piece of metal that slips over your doorknob and over the deadbolt and the striker. That now becomes a solid piece. You're not going to get through that. And then final, you take eye bolts, put them into the door, like your garage door, right? And I have this set up for my front door as well. You drill in those eye bolts onto the edge of your door so it goes into the frame. And then you just take steel pipe and you just throw it through the eye bolts. They can kick all day long and they're not going to get in there. The second biggest way
you have chosen the inappropriate breach method.
While you are trying, and you could shotgun breach that, you're not going to get past that metal pipe. All right. So you can shotgun breach all day. While you're screwing around, I can, like, if you're shotgun breaching that, I'm just going to shoot through the door. I mean, like, well, I got to worry about my neighbors. I love my neighbors. I told them if they hear shooting, just start ducking. Oh, now you just got to worry about that sliding glass door. Everybody's got that slider in the back. That's going to be your rough spot. Just something simple. A lot of people will try and take it off the tracks when they break in. That's how most burglars get in. Just do a piece of wood, like a one by one piece of wood cut during that sliding section. And now they can't push it open and start working it off the track. But what it does by fortifying those doors, what it does do is that's the primary breaching method for everybody. Their secondary is going to be a window. That gives you time to arm up, relocate, start setting people up so if they do come through those windows, you can take care of it.
Good advice, Mike.
On a low threat scenario, absolutely. But I think the big thing that the initial attacks by Hamas showed us is that even homes that are well fortified, if you're too well fortified, they're just going to burn you down. So distance is your friend. At a certain point, when you get into if it escalates to the situation where they're like, we're either going to come in there and we're going to kill you and take your stuff, or we're just going to burn your house down to make an example to the rest of the neighborhood. At that point, you got to go on the offensive. You got to have distance. And you got to keep them out of Molotov range, man. That's the big thing. And of course, the absolute best method of that is Jen's method. Take that shotgun and blast their Molotovs while they're still in their hands. That's a beautiful thing. I got to tell you, I'm out in the country. Okay, I have the option for distance. All right, and that's the big benefit for living in a rural area is being allowed to have distance. If you're in a suburban area or if you're in an urban area, you don't necessarily get that, which is very unfortunate. But you've got to be prepared to claim distance at a certain point. And by claiming distance, you may wind up having to go offensive as opposed to remaining solely defensive.
Good.
So even if you don't live in the country, if you live in an urban environment, you should have a comms plan with your neighbors and some kind of a plan. So for me, I worry about getting burned out as well. So my plan was always I have an exit route out to come around in the back door of those people or just to evac. But I don't want to lose what I have. All of my neighbors, we all have radios and we know that we can turn them on and we're all on the same frequency, which is not a public frequency. Right. It's just a random frequency we picked. We can turn on the radios and my neighbor knows that once we get you on the radio, if somebody's trying to break him down his door, I've already got a react team coming and we are going to take care of the problem. Don't come out of the house because they're so fixated on him. I'll take my react team. We're going to go deal with what's up there. We're going to tell them to like, hey, lay down.
URF up your butt.
Oh, dude. We all know when the lights go off. All of us secretly are going to be like, I've been training for this my whole life. Not that we want it. We don't want it, but there's going to be part of us like, oh, I'm going to be in my element now. Everybody thought I was crazy, but here we are.
I told my wife, first thing that happens when something like that looks going to happen, mice is unlock the gun safe.
Right on.
Have everything available.
Something else I'd add, we have a free download on our website, survivaldispatch.com, for a home defense plan. So obviously it's going to be unique to each family and each person's home, much like Keith just described in the relationship with his neighbors. There's a ton of information in that free download that will allow you to put together a plan for you and your family and to get everybody in your family up to speed on. So just like Keith described, the SOP for a neighbor who somebody's trying to break down the front door, don't worry, we've got this sort of thing. That needs to be communicated to your family, what's going on at that level as well. Does anybody got anything else to add on fortifying your home before we move on?
Having that plan for that neighborhood quick reaction force is a big thing because a neighborhood quick reaction force is going to get there, even if it's just two people with triggers to pull. That's going to get there a whole lot faster than the local sheriff's department is going to. And let's face it, all services are not going to drop off at one time, right? Even if the federal government goes kaput, who cares? All right. Because states and counties and cities and stuff, a lot of the time, especially in rural areas, they're going to be able to hold things together. at least for a while. Understand that those things are still there. You may still have limited services, but a neighborhood QRF, less than 5 minutes. You establish that neighborhood quick reaction force, and that's really going to give them something to think about.
I've got a sister-in-law who's older than us, who lives fairly close by. Because she's always, she already has this thing says, if I text you 911, does that mean come here quick and have a gun? Because they're on like horse property and they're far from the road. And if someone's trying to break into their house, she knows I'll get there faster than the sheriff's department will. But you got to have preset plans on what to do. My neighbors, I'm the first in the neighborhood. We're on a road that doesn't go through it anywhere, but I'm the very first house. And they always joke that I'm the gatekeeper. And they said, yeah, it says you slow them down till we can get there.
But I like having something simple, because in the moment when you're stressed out and your attention is pulled in many different directions, you need something really quick and simple that conveys the message, and then you can get back to business. So I like that one.
So most police departments publish their the response times. So I'm responsible for 4 church campuses in 4 different jurisdictions. I have anywhere from 5 minutes to 9 minutes response time for an active shooter event at the church, right? When I do active shooter training, I will get on the PA and say, 1 minute has gone by, 2 minutes has gone by. And there is so much stuff that has happened. The cops aren't going to get there in time, okay, at all. The response times as well in most jurisdictions are going to be what it really is. So add about another 20% to whatever they actually publish. And that's going to be your true numbers.
In the case of the officers who I just defended, they were clearly in distress, and an emergency tone went out to all jurisdictions. They are in a very urban environment, and it was still 3.5 minutes to get to them, something like that. And that's like the entire army coming. And imagine if it's just you and there are all sorts of other calls and they don't know what information is there. They're triaging your call as well. That's one other thing, is if you are going to call for law enforcement, make sure that you don't sugarcoat things, because there are lots of other competing calls. So if you really think you're in trouble, you want to SWAT yourself to use kind of the newest news that's happening out there about swatting. But seriously, SWAT yourself if you want help.
And this isn't a dig against cops. The cops are doing a phenomenal job for what they have. I think the press is doing a good job of turning the American public against them, but they are demoralized more than I've ever seen in my life. I was a cop before Rodney King, and I was a cop long after that. I'm a recent retiree. I've never seen them so demoralized to the point. It used to be, we would talk about grid down scenarios. And what would you do? And everybody across the board would be, my family's going to be taken care of for a little while, and we're going to wait to see what happens. And a lot of them were like, I'm just going to bring my family to the PD because we'll be taken care of, and then we'll take care of the PD and we'll help everybody in the city the best that we can. Right. And it was very much this community-based thing. That was when we had support. Now, first thing they're going to do is go to the police station and burn the police station down. They're already protesting at cops' homes after they have a righteous self-defense shooting, and they're going to their home to protest. These guys are just done, and they're going the fastest they can, but they are now realizing I don't have the support I had anymore. They're prosecuting me for crime, for just defending myself and others, like what Jen handled. So I'm just going to worry about my family, and I'll get there when I get there. And they're not going to put themselves out like we used to.
And
Just
that's where a couple of years ago, Atlanta PD basically just phoned it in for, what was it?
Oh, they had Atlanta PD. The public doesn't realize this. I put a lot of this info out. I had the watch list. Who showed up for work for Atlanta? 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant for the entire city. Sorry, look at that. Even Apple says.
I feel like I passed the torch on to you, Keith.
Thanks, man.
I warned you.
I'll figure it out one day.
I warned you. So I know Jen's got to leave in 5 minutes or so. So the next category that we have, if this Black Swan event were to happen this year or any year, the ability to get home. So what are your thoughts on that, Jen, before you leave us?
Yeah, you've talked about this many times. A lot of people talk about having a bug out bag, which is the exact opposite, 180 of what you want, because you are most ready in your home, and that's where you want to be. That's where you want to be fortified, and getting back home is going to be key. For me, it depends on where I am. I'm in totally different environments, one place or the other. But if I'm in Washington, for me, the biggest threat is like a huge earthquake or something like that, where all these 100-foot trees go down and my car I have the ability to use a handheld saw and pull things out of the road with a tow strap and things like that in order to get home. But really, the bigger thing for me is communication. How am I going to communicate when the cell towers go down, when the communication is down with my family, and what is the plan to either meet or get home or what? Because that's the biggest stress for me is being without communication, being apart from everyone, being away from home, and how do I fix that?
Yeah, good concern. We actually have an upcoming video, 2 videos for that matter, on the newer GMRS HTs and base stations. So this is one of the ones we're reviewing. There's another one over there. So they're pre-programmed with 22 channels, 8 repeaters, which is standard for GMRS, but they no longer have the low wattage FRS amplifiers in them. They're 5.5, 6 watts. You can put antennas on them that are tuned to the 70 centimeter band, which is GMRS, whereas a ham radio has multiple bands. It's trying to be all things, all people. But in California in particular, which has the largest network of ham radio repeaters in the entire country, it's all volunteer built. There are guys with GMRS base stations, 50 watts, so nothing compared to 1,500 watts on the ham side, that HT 75 miles in opposite directions from that base station can communicate with each other. 150 miles, somebody who has a high elevation. So we're actually going to be installing one here and seeing what it looks like in a suburban environment. But with these 2 GMRS radios that we just tested that are in the upcoming video went 4 times as far as any ham radio ever has for us before in a heavily wooded area that we're in. 4 times as far, and no ham radio technician's license on that. This is about as easy peasy as it gets. Throw it in a Faraday bag and you've got some communication set up. Anybody else on get home stuff? Your recommendations? You're at work, the Black Swan event happens, you got to get home. What do you do, Keith?
So I've got the standard stuff that everybody else does for heading home. Like I'm at work and now I got to come home. But the problem is I travel and I go to other states. Like I may be in Saipan to go teach a class. Well, I'm not swimming home. Right. Or another thing, I'll be in St. Louis or something like that. So realistically, at my age, I'm not hiking across the country to get home anymore. But I do pack to know that I can bunker down somewhere and I can take care of myself. So I have a typical, the Boy Scout 10 essentials. And I have that on my carry-on. I always bring a gun with me. People always say like, oh, flying with a gun is so hard. No, it's not. I fly with a gun once a week, man. That's super easy. And I don't bring just one. There's no limit on the number of guns you bring. Sometimes, depending on where I go, I'll bring an SBR as well. There's a bunch of stuff to go with that. ATF, don't screw with me. I've got it all taken care of, right? But there's legal ways to fly with an SBR. If you're going to like Washington or some other communist state behind enemy lines, there's other guns that you can bring, a long rifle with you, right? But sometimes I'll check a rifle with me, depending on what's going on in the country at the time. But I'll always bring at least 2 pistols with me and 3 mags per pistol. And then honestly, when I go there, I check in. So if I'm going to anybody here on this list to their area of the country, I'm gonna be like, hey man, I'm gonna be in your area. Can you be my Alamo? And I always have an Alamo of where I can go to. Right. And I always have a paper map of how to get there. And I know I can walk to where they need to go, or I can find a bicycle or something to get where I need to go. So you need to be thinking about that with travel. I do a lot of overseas travel. This year I've been in 2 countries. When I was in New Zealand, I'm not really worried about what's going to happen in New Zealand when I'm there. Pretty stable place, pretty far away, probably one of the safest places to be in the world when stuff goes down. But I have a paper map that tells me how to get to each consulate and how to get to the embassy. So that way, if I need to go, and then I have an Alamo there as well. I've got tons of friends in New Zealand and they're all funny because they're like, oh, you're one of those prepper guys because they don't understand. But I can't bring a gun to New Zealand, but I certainly have friends that do have guns that are like, yeah, we got you covered. Like I've got everything covered across the board. What are you going to do?
That's awesome, Keith. Mike, what are your thoughts on getting home?
So just like Keith, I travel a lot. Of course, thank God I drive. And you remember the big exercise that I ran last year, trying to get back here from Wyoming. We ran an exercise as if it was a grid down scenario, trying to get fuel and everything like that. Trying to put together a fuel plan was just by itself. But just like you said, Keith, having a safe haven plan, I'll tell you what, I've got a whole map specifically laid out for safe havens across the board. And if I do these cross country trips, I'll call all my safe haven warning people that are in that path lane in the process before I even go on the trip and say, hey, I'm going on this trip. Just are you going to be home? And is Safe Haven going to be available? And what do we got to do to set things up? Let's refresh Safe Haven entry techniques. And if they've got their act together, they're not going to just be, oh, hey, just go ahead and knock on my door when you get here. Okay. If I need a Safe Haven, you probably shouldn't have me just walking up to your door, knocking on your door. Now, first, you need to know what kind of color vehicle I'm in, but there needs to be some procedures. So, but having a fuel plan, having a Safe Haven plan, having the ability to actually understand all the logistics that are going to be required to be able to move from there to here. Now, if you work 30 miles from home, okay, you're probably not going to need a Safe Haven. You can pretty well do that in a good 2-day home, and be safe about it. But I agree. I usually pack heavy. Heck, I just went out to Seattle and I didn't bring a long gun, but I certainly did take a whole lot of long magazines. When I got looked at, I said, I'm just passing through. My magazines do not apply to your state laws. Bye.
So taking it from like a macro scenario, international in Keith's example, national in your example, Mike, bring it back down to more of a micro level, just a handful of points that I wrote down ahead of time. Jen's suggestion, having secondary comms. I would mention something. Keith has some great information on ChristianWarriorTraining.com on used police radios that just so happen to have encryption left on them. When you buy like a Chinese Baofeng ham radio, if it has encryption, it's not legal. In an SHTF situation, doesn't really matter. But most HTs that fall outside of the scope of Keith's recommendation don't have encryption. But Mike brought up, this is going back a couple months now, a great idea of like an SOP where, just for argument's sake, it's 12 noon. We're going to be on whatever the hour of the day is -3. So we're going to go to channel 9. And every 15 minutes, we're going to go down a couple channels or up a couple channels. Then we get back to the top of the hour. So basically some poor man's frequency hopping, for lack of a better term, especially since you're not getting any encryption on that. I went
back to the old original Cold War SF concepts for bouncing your radios around, SOPs that weren't written down anywhere. Everybody just keeps them in their heads.
And unlikely that an adversary is going to pick up on that because there's far easier targets than you at that particular point. Having a get home bag, like Jen mentioned, instead of a bug out bag, a get home bag, and being able to, Mike always says this, being able to quickly assess and change on the spot. Maybe the average American works 15 minutes or 15 miles, I should say, away from home. There may be something happens and you may have a whole bunch of stuff in your GHB bag that you just flat out don't need because you can get home faster than what it takes for all that. So ditching stuff out of your GHB before you hit the ankle express. If you can't get home right away, having a rendezvous point with your family members and having multiple routes home comes from Keith, because like Keith in the past has mentioned on Survival Dispatch News, okay, well, this is your regular route, may not be available when the shit hits the fan. Go take this alternate route and go do it at rush hour and see what happens. So it's a relatively similar.
You direct traffic, dude. When you direct traffic, it's hilarious. People roll up, block everybody, and go, I need to go this way. Well, you're not. And it's the biggest joke for cops ever. And I'm like, you need to find another way home. They're like, I don't know another way home. Literally, they've been in the area for 20 years and they only know one way to get home, and they vapor lock. And all of us, like, cops make memes about you people that do this. Like, we have the best freaking memes about you. And we all laugh our asses off, and we all laugh knowing, man, when the apocalypse happens, you're going to die fast.
Yeah, the stick in front of a trail of ants. Man.
Oh man, Sheriff Lamb posted this thing on Instagram that was so funny. It was this group of people in the car, and they're like, "Help!" Oh, they call 911. Help! We're stuck in the car. The doors are locked. We can't get out. Oh, this is real.
The multiple way home is actually something that we learned, because when we're working, you're always worried about someone following you, and the last place you want them to follow you is home, because that's where your family is. So we always vary our routes from work to home and everything else to make it difficult for the guys or bad guys might be following us. But it's important for everybody. So because, okay, a bridge may go out, and then what do? And you gotta know those multiple routes home. And a funny story, we were doing some surveillance detection training, and we were up in Denver, and there was a local that we were training, and we called it Area Fam. We made them go out and find these odd little things and figure out ways to get there. Of course, they had to do it all on paper maps. And there was a big B-52 bomber in the middle of town where an Air Force base used to be. And that was one of the points of interest they had to go find. And this guy went there and found it. He goes, I didn't know this was here. I've lived here 25 years. There's a B-52 right in the middle of town. He had no clue because he only drove from home to work. And that wasn't
You
on the
know,
map.
it's funny when you're a little kid and you're out playing around and you're on a bike, every little nook and cranny of where you live, everything about it. As an adult, you should know the same thing. It's weird to me.
That's why one of the absolute best sources of intelligence out there are the local kids
and homeless people.
and hookers.
Hookers?
Why are you talking to hookers?
Is that
Man, they're a
Holy
great
crap.
source of intelligence. I'm just saying,
They
guys
are.
cannot keep their mouths shut when their pants are around their ankles.
Oh, God bless your wife.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
right?
telling you. I'm just saying.
I'd
Run
like
an
to
intel
get-
network. Ask. Yeah, come on, man. Jeff, you can speak to this.
Don't
Run
let
an
him
intel
draw you
network.
into
About
his shit,
the-
Jeff. Don't let
Your
him draw
face
you
is
in.
about the color of the
I'm not getting drug
danger.
into this one.
Yeah, so I'd like to get to the conflicted question before Jen has to leave, but there's 4 quick little bullets that I'd add, just miscellaneous stuff that came from conversations offline before this. And I think Keith hit on it earlier. Jeff did, one of the two, to download resources now, videos, PDFs, articles, books, whatever the case may be. Stick them on a USB key, stick it in a Faraday bag so you have access to that. Keep an eye on X, aka Twitter. I can tell you straight up that Elon has done it, whether you like Elon or not, he's done a phenomenal job restoring free speech, number one. Number two, shit happens faster on X than anywhere else. So I'll see something pop up on X. It won't hit mainstream media for 12, 18 hours or the next day. It's the best way to monitor stuff, especially civil unrest. It'll show up there before it'll show up anywhere else. Keith raised a great point. Weapons training on a regular basis. Follow Mike Sterling's advice. Don't just stand there. Like, a range is good for dialing in an optic and getting familiar with the location of all of the things like mag releases and whatnot on your guns, but you got to do it under some sort of duress. So if you follow the Mike Sterling school of thought, you have somebody shoot you in the back with a airsoft gun, ankles. He likes the ankles, doesn't tickle. And the last thing I've got on here is prep number one that at least 83% of Americans neglect, and that's improve your fitness level. Because if you have to bug out or you got to get your ass home and you can't walk any type of distance, you're in deep, deep trouble. We won't harp on any more than that. So, Mike, read the conflicted question again, and let's see what Jen thinks first so that she can get to her next appointment.
Okay. Again, conflicted. After the collapse, a loved one ran out of mood regulating medication and has lost it. Oh man, I feel this so much. She is frequently putting the group at risk by not obeying the general rules of the group and picking fights with other members. Tensions have built to the point where the rest of the group members want you to take decisive action and handle the situation. What would you do to restore order?
Ladies first.
Boy.
Ladies first.
So, boy, I have a lot to say on this. So, first of all, I think that a lot of these mood regulating drugs are hurtful, not helpful. And why I say that is that the SSRIs, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, are working to try to increase the amount of serotonin, or the happy hormone, in your brain. But what it also does is it blocks the production of serotonin in the gut. The gut actually makes 95% of the serotonin in the body, not the brain. You have to have a really healthy gut in order to be healthy mentally as well. And they think actually that people taking SSRIs in pregnancy may be responsible for all sorts of problems in kids, including potentially autism. So I don't, this is not a conspiracy thing or anything like that, but I think sometimes when we use drugs to solve a problem that could be solved in a natural way, we can cause more problems. So what I would say is I would plead with the group to give this person a little bit of time, allow them to come off that drug and use other natural methods like a good diet, sunshine, good sleep, being kind to that person, and trying to help them rewire. But in the immediate time frame, I think you got to get that person, you got to calm things down for the whole group. I would try to isolate that person a little bit from the group and try to get things under control.
Good advice. Keith?
Jen hit it on the head. A lot of people are like, oh, throw them out. Like, throw them out. Go put them over here. And you can't, that's not the way things work. You want some grace and mercy for yourself. And if you want some for yourself, you got to show it to others. I think she hit it on the head about sunlight, keeping it. You got to go around and talk to everybody and do a little bit of mediation and say, hey, look, we're all working with difficult circumstances and we all have to, but then separating, I think is good to go. You just got to think about security for that person as well, though, because you don't want them to get captured, taken, or anything bad happen to them. So they're going to have to be somewhat close. But isolation could be, you definitely don't want to put them in a room and then shut off the lights and be like, all right, see you later. It's just going to make everything worse, right? But it could be like, hey, why don't you sit outside in this house over here and we can still watch in, go chill out.
I'm kind of with everybody here. You don't just cast them out. They're not a horse that broke a leg. You don't shoot them. But for the sanctity of the group, it maybe you may want to separate them maybe from the majority of the group. And then if you're aware of what's going on, that they're on a mood altering drug and they are coming off of it. And I'm not a big fan of these drugs. I think they're more times they do more harm than good. And they would be better coming off. Take it upon yourself to be the person to put up with the crazy for a while, to interact with them, because I think if you isolate them completely, it's going to make the problem, excuse me, it's going to make the problem worse, not better. We all have crazy family members that when we can, we just don't deal with. But in that situation, someone's going to have to. And if you're aware of what's going on, take it upon yourself to kind of jump on that grenade, because it's not going to kill you. It may make you nuts for a little while, but to kind of take that person back down. Now, if they go completely off the rails and stay off the rails, you may have to readdress, but give them a shot, give them a chance to kind of, people handle stress in different ways. Some people, they get normalized really quickly. Other people, it takes a lot longer. So just keep that in consideration.
Those good thoughts, Jeff. I'm going to let you clean up, Mike, and I'll go next because you always come up with something completely unique angle that nobody else has thought of. So here were my thoughts when you first posed the question. I think the first thing I would try to do is try and find her meds, trying to find something equivalent to her meds somewhere, trying to find downers to kind of calm her down, whether it's an SSRI or something else. And worst case scenario, I'd force her to smoke the hippie hay or eat some cannabis and just get her off that ledge. But I think in the interim, before you find the chemicals, better living through chemistry, I would do something to isolate her, at least to the point where she couldn't draw attention to us from people who may want to steal our shit. You're up, Mike.
You just lost my vote.
like I said, better living through chemistry. Hey, real quick about weed, though, what a lot of people don't realize, because I've been to a bunch of cannabis producers, they're besides the bad chemicals that they're putting in there that are horrible, weed and the amount of THC that's in weed right now is causing massive anxiety and paranoia, and that could actually make it worse. So just something to, people think of weed like, from our generation, think weed like when we were in high school. It ain't that anymore. Okay, we're way past that. So it could just something to think about. I know
that's a good
comments
point.
are going to explode.
No,
now.
it's true. It's the difference. It's the difference between like the old opioids and fentanyl now. Yeah. They are just jacking everything up. The amount of THC is causing so many problems in the emergency department. I agree with you. It causes more anxiety. It's causing cyclical vomiting. This is not the weed that you had in high school.
I've never been a smoker. I've never done this stuff, honestly.
Oh, come on,
Bill
man.
Clinton.
You're a closet devil's weed guy.
No, I'm really seriously not, because if I'm even in close proximity to it, it makes me go to sleep almost instantly. You got a weird
you're that guy.
I am that guy. But what I would say then, because I didn't know that, you guys are more up to speed than I am. We'll ditch the hippie hay, but we'll try and find some edible cannabis, because I know people who take that and it puts them to sleep and all the other stuff and doesn't seem to make them go cuckoo like you're describing. Okay, Mike, sorry to interrupt. You're back.
So my stepson is actually involved in that industry very heavily. He actually gave me quite a bit of an education, and a lot of it actually has to do with the strain of what type of THC you're dealing with. Okay, if you're dealing with some of these that are specifically genetically engineered to produce a higher THC level versus a specific strain that is meant to produce a certain effect. Okay, and believe me, that some of this stuff has changed my life for the ability to have a little bit of pain management and also get my sleep back. Okay. And
Are you a stoner, Mike?
No, absolutely. I never
just
touch the
kidding.
stuff. Absolutely never touch the stuff.
Right. So we're giving the bombs to the stoner.
Would
That
you
makes
rather
sense.
have me heavily excited or very calm? You get a choice. Okay. There's no in between.
I'll take excited.
Okay. But so we're talking about crazy Aunt Elaine here. All right. We can't go back to what we did in the 1800s and just chain her up in the basement. All right. That's just the wrong thing to do. I think we all agree with that. And actually, I have a little bit of skin in this game because I have a family member that I fully expect here that I don't want here, but I gotta accept coming here that's in this situation.
Kind of sounds like Thanksgiving or Christmas.
Except it's multiple personality disorder that's associated with it. Oh, that's a good time.
So three for the price of one.
Oh, it's more like 7. It's more like 7, and I'll talk about that more offline. But Dr. Jen, I think Dr. Jen is right on the money. You've got to show a little bit of grace. You've got to say, okay, let's go ahead, isolate this person, not completely, but let's go ahead, isolate them from the group a little bit. Let's get them some sun. Let's try and mellow them out, and let's try and work the problem versus just taking the nuclear approach off the bat and go, nope, you're out. All right, let's work the problem the way Dr. Jan said.
I think there's something that none of us are really focusing on is this person might be an asset down the road. This is someone who's part of your group, understands your group, is committed to the group, let's say. Not committed, mentally committed, but all because they're a problem now, they might be very valuable in the future. So you look at them as preserving a resource that they may be, hey, I know how to do that, or I've done this before, that you may not need today, but you may need next week. So I look at it as preserving a potential resource. It might be just another back to do work or to haul firewood. But if you start eliminating people who bother you or get on your nerves, before long, you're going to be all by yourself. And then you're going to fall and break a leg, and then what? So
think of it as fixing an electrical problem.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. You don't throw the car away because the alternator goes out. You fix the alternator.
I think what we've discussed on this entire thing is just back to the original definition of a Black Swan event, because everything is on all of this unforeseen, right? Unforeseen in foresight. So how do you protect against that? Well, it's fundamentals. You go ahead, you get your fundamentals. You've got your food, you've got your shelter, and you've got your water. You get your skills. You get some good fitness going. Okay, you're no good if you're dead face down in a ditch with a 70-pound rucksack on you because you had a blowout 3 minutes down the road. You're no good to anybody like that. You're no good to your family. Take care of your family, and in order to take care of your family, you have to take care of you. That's what I have to say.
I was just going to say, Jen, that's good in general. If you don't look after yourself, you're not in a position to look after anybody else, regardless of what the relationship is.
And the other thing is body and mind go together. So you might think I'm the smartest guy in the world, but if you are struggling physically, your mind is not going to work as well. Think about that. But the other thing is, my very first thing is, whatever it is, when something happens, the first thing people do is they freak out a little bit. Everyone does, right? Like, wow, what the hell just happened? But you have to just stop and think and have a plan. Don't just knee-jerk react. Respond. Don't react, respond.
I can't speak for anybody else, Jen, but I don't think of you as a guy. Are you suggesting you're changing your pronouns or something here? Like,
I don't have pronouns.
But you can't mess with me about
I don't know what that means. I don't even know what that means.
Listen, I was telling Jen years ago, my wife bought me a chrome bicycle horn because I'd be reading something on my laptop and I'd be, oh my God, you won't believe what's going on in clown world now. So she got me this bicycle horn, which has gone MIA, so that when I read something crazy in the news, I could honk the horn. Very cathartic, made me feel better. I was planning on introducing it to Survival Dispatch News today in case anything clown worldish came up, and lo and behold, I have no horn, but I guarantee you I will have a horn for the next episode of Survival Dispatch News.
I'm very disappointed. I was looking forward to that horn today.
It's coming. Just be patient. All right. Appreciate all y'all's time. Thank you for coming on Survival Dispatch News, and thank you for following Survival Dispatch.
Become a Survival Dispatch Insider. We bring together survival enthusiasts and preppers to share knowledge and skills, which means you can enhance your preparedness for emergencies and ensure the safety of your community. The results you'll get: improve your emergency preparedness by learning skills and strategies from experienced preppers. Build lasting connections with like-minded individuals to share your passion for safety and readiness. Access a wealth of knowledge and resources to assist you in protecting you and your community in certain situations. Go to survivaldispatch.com to get started.